So what do you have to say to the people who don't have to think about race on a normal basis, that don't really think race is an issue in America?
No matter what you've heard, we don't live in a post-racial society, and we never will. Race is going to persist. But we can make it better if we continue to try and have intelligent conversation about it. So instead of trying to ignore the problem, I suggest we all try to approach it with the best attitude possible.
Until the year 2000, the United States Census did not allow for respondents to identify themselves as more than one race. For the vast majority of people, the lack of such an option would not even have registered. If you were white, you listed white. If you were black or Asian, you listed black or Asian. It was as simple as that. But for a small but significant group of people, it was not so simple. For people of a multiracial background, filling out the census was a messy and complicated affair. It meant the censoring of one's family history and the obliteration of part of one's identity from the records book. And the message sent by the lack of a multiracial option was clear. In America, you must pick a side.
This census is a commitment to the American way of life. To be counted as a resident of the United States, I think, is one of the proudest things that can happen to you in this country. It's important. Stand up for yourself, be counted, let people know you're out there.
But now there are more than 9 million people in the United States who identify as multiracial. 9 million people who from birth have been forced to both think about and live race differently. And as their numbers continue to grow, America needs to realize that its conceptions of race are woefully outdated. I would know. I'm one of those 9 million. In my multiracial family, my dad is white and my mom is Asian. I'm the one on the far left. But that's an old photo. Here I am now. You know I can take over, right? Fine, okay. Oh, and I apologize on behalf of my voiceover for not properly introducing myself. My name is Spencer Brown, BHS class of 2014. For my senior project in my race, identity, and literature class, I decided to make a documentary. This documentary that you're watching right now on the multiracial identity. As was stated before, I myself am multiracial. My dad is white, my mom is Chinese. And so it was from both a very personal and an academic standpoint that I wanted to take a real look at the multiracial identity from the point of view of the people who live it daily. And the only way to do that was for multiracial people themselves to speak. So that's exactly what I did. I interviewed my multiracial friends and classmates about their identity and their experiences with race. I did this to jumpstart a conversation about race in America that is long overdue. But enough of me talking. Here's what they had to say.
My mother's from Spain, so she's Spanish, and my father's African American, and he was born in the United States. I identify as Spanish or Hispanic, and then African American.
My dad is white. He's part Scottish and part Italian, and my mom is Chinese. So I would say I'm half white and half Chinese.
I'm Filipino, Irish, Italian, French Canadian, Spanish, Korean, and American. But I would identify as white.
I am half Nigerian, half Italian. Racially, when I write it down on a paper, I identify as African American, but if you were to ask me, I'd identify as biracial.
I am half black, half white, and my black side is Kenyan and my white side's American. I identify as half black, half white, but I think I identify more with my white side now, and for my whole life that's how it's been.
My racial ethnic background, I'm pretty clean-cut split. My mother's entire half is Irish, my dad's entire half is Korean. Racially, I pretty much identify as just that. I consider myself Irish and I consider myself Korean.
I identify as African American, but I'm half white and half black. So my mom's white, my dad's black, but I would say I identify as African American.
When I was 4 years old and I was skiing over in France with my father, and he's African American. So someone pointed out, oh, I didn't know black people ski. And I was confused. I was like, oh, why do black people, like, what's wrong with black people? Why don't they ski? And I asked my father, like, what's up with this? Like, why did this happen, you know? And he kind of explained to me, and I was really young at the time, so I wasn't really sure what just happened, but basically that's the first time when I noticed I was different.
In 7th grade, when all my friends started to wear makeup and like blue eyeliner, and I remember wearing blue eyeliner and remembering how weird it looked on me. But when I imagined myself wearing it, I imagined being blonde and like sort of looking like all my friends who were blonde and white. And then when I finally realized that it looked really strange, that I was wearing like makeup that didn't really match my skin tone, I think then I realized that I wasn't like all my friends.
I don't think there was a moment when I decided I was African American, but if I had to choose one time when it really was like a turn back now sort of thing, like I'm taking this path, this is who I am, I realize that is who I am, I'd probably go freshman year when I first walked into the African American Scholars Program. At Runkle, there were 2 other black students in my grade, both of them girls. And my dad has always been a very strong figure on me, and like in my life, and I think his he would always talk about how much he loved being black. He would talk about it all the time, and I spend a lot of time with my family in Brooklyn, my dad's side of the family, who are all black. So I knew I was black, and I was not proud of the fact, I guess. I wasn't ashamed of it, but it wasn't something I was necessarily proud of. And not until I joined Scholars was that something that I really came to take pride in. So I'd say that maybe was a defining moment of race for me.
Once when I was younger, my family on my mother's side, who's Asian, they came over and for like Christmas or something, and my aunt's son had a white girlfriend, and I heard them talking about how she was upset that her Asian son is dating this white girl, and I think that kind of stuck with me because my parents are white and Asian, and it just kind of made, like, from a young age I kind of thought that like I just didn't really fit, or something was like wrong because of that.
Has there ever been any confusion? Have you felt confusion about your racial identity?
Yeah, that was for a while.
Yeah.
I mean, that confusion, I think a lot of it stems from the fact that I was in a school where all of my friends were, actually a lot of them happened to be Latino, but a lot of them were white, and none of them were, outside of like basketball, but not in my school, were black. So identifying as black is sort of a tough thing when nobody you spend time with it really is. So when I hang out with my family or when I hang out with my dad, yeah, but not with my best friends. So that was a struggle. Like, and also the cultural side of it. What does it mean to be black? Like, is being black walking around with your pants at your ankles? Is being black having heritage from Africa? And I think there is a cultural side to being black, actually, but it's not being able to rap or play basketball. And I came to that conclusion a lot later. So I think for a while, yeah, I definitely did struggle with who I was. And I don't even know if I knew I was struggling with it at the time, but I was.
I think the worst time, not the worst, but a time that I was really confused was from 6th to 8th grade, because my friends were all white and I didn't see myself as Asian or whatever, multiracial. And I remember this one time, another time in 7th grade, I was shopping and there was a mirror on the wall, and I was just walking past the mirror but not even looking at it. And out of the corner of my eye, I saw someone in the mirror. And I was like, wow, that person, who is that person? I've never seen that person before. And so I looked, and then I realized it was the mirror, and I realized that it was me that I was looking at. And I don't know, every single time I see myself, I kind of remember that one time where I was kind of shocked to see myself and not really see who I am and what I look like. So I think internally I still see myself as white and not blonde, but like lighter hair than I have and lighter skin and everything.
I think I'm still dealing with it now. I really haven't figured it out yet, I think. I guess in speaking of, well, this year, I mean, I'm in an SWS English class, and I'm in African American seminar, and that mainly has kids of color in it, but I still feel, in a class that I thought that I would fit in with, I still feel really distant from everyone else, because I think being biracial depends on your personality, and like I'm more of a quiet person, but if you're biracial and like you're loud and talkative, you could see being biracial as like a good thing, because you can connect with all different types of people. But for me, I can be sort of distant, so sometimes I feel it as not a good thing certain times, like in dance situations, like I think I feel it as a good thing, but like in the classroom when I'm sitting and like everyone's generally one type of shade to me or two different types of shades, then like I feel really separate because I'm still trying to figure out like what exactly I am.
Partially it's kind of like fun to be different, but also it kind of like otherized me and made me uncomfortable.
There's always this sentiment of not knowing how to define yourself when you're multiracial. Like, where do you draw the line? Like, can I say that I'm Asian? And there have always been like people who've said to me like, you're not Asian, you're white. But I don't really think of it like that. Like, I'm Irish, I'm also Asian, and I shouldn't have to pick one over the other.
I've definitely wished that I could be one or the other, and the one that I would choose would be white, because I think being white is definitely easier than being anything else.
When I started wearing makeup or like changing my appearance, one of like my hang-ups would be wearing eyeliner like all the time, every day, because I thought my eyes were too small. And I don't know why exactly.
I definitely didn't feel any self-hate, but I did feel, actually no, there were times when I felt inferior, but it was back to that cultural side of it, that this idea that I had for a while, that I had to be this certain person, this certain way, if I wanted to be black. So the question was, okay, I can be black and not be who I am, or I can be white and maybe a little truer to who I am as a person. I love to read, I love to, like those things aren't portrayed in the media. Those aren't the black people I would see. The ones I would see are like my dad, are very smart people, but at the same time, the ones I would see even more were the ones on TV who don't look like that, who don't read, who don't like school, who... For a time, I tried to pretend like I just didn't really like school. So I think there was some, I made myself inferior. I felt inferior. I tried to make myself inferior because I felt because I was black, I had to be inferior. I had to be worse at school. I had to not want to read. I had to play basketball all the time. I don't know. So I guess there was somewhat a feeling of inferiority there for a while, and I eventually figured that out, thankfully.
I went to Nicaragua and Costa Rica sophomore and junior year over the summer, and a lot of the people would call me white, and that was, I don't know, it was a reinforcement that I was white because everyone else was tan, or more tan than I was, which is kind of surprising. And so I wouldn't say it felt good. I don't know, I guess it did feel good because it was a reinforcement to something that I really strongly felt, but then it was more of a letdown when I came back and people said, oh, you're so tan, like, oh, you look like something that I don't necessarily identify with.
I feel like the way that I see myself is not the way that other people see me. well, I've never, because I haven't thought that much about my race, I've never thought that when people look at me, they see my race before they see anything else. So the people who I've wanted to date have always just been like people who I'm friends with or who my friends are friends with, and those have all been white people. But the people who I feel like have shown the most interest in me have all not been white. I think that might be what causes the most like feeling of self-hate, I guess. Like feeling like the people who you like don't like you and won't ever.
When I'm around all my friends who are white, I think I kind of have to put up this, like fit this identity that I'm, and this role that I'm kind of playing. Like it's not actually me, but I'm kind of acting a little bit. And so because it used to be more I was actually acting, and now because I've done it so much, it's just kind of been normalized for me, and I've been desensitized to the fact that I'm like playing this person that I'm not. So I feel like when I'm around people that are of different races or are multiracial, like my parents or my cousins specifically, I feel more comfortable, but not, like I feel comfortable with my friends, but I feel more internally comfortable and like, I don't know. I can't express it. It's like very internal. Like it's the most, yeah, I feel like most comfortable, but like really inside. And I can just say whatever I want and like feel free to ask questions or not be criticized. Or.
So you often feel just kind of boxed in when you're in an all-white environment?
Yeah, boxed in. So I feel boxed in, but then I also feel like being boxed in or accepting that I'm in the box isn't enough. So I feel like I have to even go further and be more white than everyone else because I'm not white to make up for the fact that I don't look white.
I want to say it changes because it does, and you go back. I don't know. This is good because I will admit that I do act differently around different groups, and when I'm with say the African American scholars kids, I do act differently, but when I'm with say like my white preppy friends, like I will act differently than when I'm with my African American friends. And I don't really change my tone or anything, but I think it's mainly the topics we talk about change the whole like idea of who you are, and kind of you just shift subjects, and the subjects are completely different when you're with one group and completely different when you're with the other. So I don't know if my tone of voice or what I wear kind of changes because for me it doesn't. But it's just the subjects and what we talk about, what we feel comfortable talking about changes.
I think I act very differently. Like I said, I have two friends that are of color that I hang out with who are girls. And I think with them, I can just sort of say what I want to say, like without having to worry about it. Just because like I know that they've been through similar experiences as I have, and I can kind of just like speak. But I think with my friends that are, I guess, white, I have to be a little bit more careful, like especially with my best friend. Like I try to avoid race like as much as I can just because like I don't want to talk about it with her, which is terrible. But yeah, and I think with my friends of color, I'm a little bit more outgoing and loud. But with my friends that are generally white, I'm a little more calm.
So how did your parents handle the subject of race growing up? Was it brought up a lot?
Never.
They've never really tried to do anything. I think both of them grew up not thinking about race because my mom grew up white in America and my dad grew up black in Kenya, where he's surrounded by everyone who looks like him. So I think both of them raising me, they probably didn't have that like in the front of their minds because it wasn't on their minds so much when they were growing up.
My parents raised me thinking or letting me know that like I'm black. So they never ever told me that I was white. It was always I'm black, because my parents are activists and my mom is, it's sort of the black side more took over just because my dad does work in race and my mom is black, so that's sort of how it worked.
When handling the subject of race, my parents went about it differently. My mom is actually English, so she was born in England and moved to New York when she was about 3. So I don't think she ever refers to herself as white. She refers to herself as English. so really, I've been told my entire life I'm half English, half African American. So that was, I don't know, that was a little funny. And my dad really pushed his pride in being black. He really did try and show that it was something that he took pride in that was really beautiful. I had these little note cards when I was little that really had all these famous African American writers and activists, all hundreds. It was like 100 thick. Marcus Garvey, Malcolm X, Fannie Lou Hamer. I don't know. Just lists. This goes on and on. So I actually, there was this game, not a game, but an activity Dr. Vic had us do before we joined Scholars, where we had to name as many African American and Latino people as we could that weren't sports stars, singers, those regular pop culture references like politicians, social activists, artists, and my list was like 3 times that of everyone else in the class. I remember Dr. Vic was fairly impressed with the list I was able to compile that day. So I think the way my dad approached race was really trying to instill, a pride in me, trying to, even though I did end up having problems with pop culture and what I saw African Americans as in the media, I think it was less so because of the way he approached race.
I'm closer with my mom than my dad, so, and my mom's family they all live here, and none of my dad's family lives here except for him, so all the family that I see regularly is white, and everyone who I'm close to pretty much is white.
In Spain, when we go visit my mother's side of the family, everyone's white there. My father's the only African American, along with my sister and I. And it's really interesting because it's not talked about, and it's almost as if they're making an exception for my father, because he's like, he's a smart guy, he's a funny guy, and he's really friendly. So it's almost as if they make an exception for the exceptional Negro, right? And we don't really talk about it, which is kind of interesting because I never really thought about it that way.
Have you ever felt, as someone who has lighter skin, and people don't normally think that you are half black?
Yeah.
And you've witnessed racism happen to your father.
Yeah.
How does that affect your identity where he's half of you?
Yeah.
But people treat you differently?
That's a great question because it bothers me, and it almost bothers me that I'm not affected the same way because that creates a divide between who my father is and who I am almost in a way. And it's almost as I can't identify as being 100% black and being, his type of people because I don't get treated the same way sometimes. But I can speak to saying that I have been treated, mixed in with like Latino. And I identify as Hispanic, not Latino, someone from like Southern America and Central America. So I think it's different, and I have been, characterized as Latino and then treated differently because, they thought I was Mexican or whatever. So I can't speak for knowing that, I can't speak towards the divide between my father and I because I haven't experienced that too often, but I know that I have been characterized as other things which I feel offended almost by being just pushed into this category with a bunch of other people.
That's a really good question. I guess in the big picture of things, we're starting to live in an era where there are a lot more multiracial people sort of coming into the picture, and as such, that makes it harder for people to define things in the clean-cut boxes that they like to. And so I think I'm really part of a new generation here in that I'm hard to put a label around. And maybe I'm not even that hard to put a label around, but there are going to be kids in the future who are going to be even harder to put a label around. And I think that's going to make the idea of how to define people, if you're holding a prejudice, where lines fall, where things are drawn, And I think that in the future, people are going to have to ask some really big questions about who they are and like how they see themselves.
I think I see my role as bridging gaps, because I think that there are a lot of gaps between, well, speaking in terms of like black and white, there are a lot of gaps between black and white. And I think that if you're biracial, multiracial, you're in the middle. So you're sort of filling out that space and being able to connect with both sides of the races. I also see my color as trying to make things better for biracial people, because I think like race in general is complex, but like when you're biracial, I think personally, I think it's like it may, well, I don't know, I can't speak for everyone, but I think it's even more complex because you're not one, you're both. So I don't know, I think having more biracial people would help.
It's a challenge sometimes being biracial, especially African American in the United States, but I think if you don't attack it, it's kind of your fault almost. You have to put yourself out there and make yourself confused and interact with people and let them know basically, yeah, I am biracial, and I think that helps in a way to stop the problem and see that, you know, blacks are just good people, and I mean all these stereotypes, basically to cancel out the stereotypes.
So there we have it. Multiracial people are here to stay, and our very existence is changing the racial fabric of America. To alleviate America's racial divide, multiracial people must start to own their own identity and to stop others from defining who they are. Racial identity will always be a confusing issue for multiracial people, but hopefully once the period of confusion is over, each and every multiracial person can project their identity, project who they are racially, with strength and pride. Wait, what is race? You're right, what is race? No, really, what is race? So what is your definition of race?
My definition of race is pretty much just whatever you're born as, that's what you are. It's your genetic makeup, I guess, like where you're ethnically from.
Yeah, because you said before that your definition of race was genetic, but as a person who is from two different genetic backgrounds, does that mean you're a brand new race? Or does that call into question what even is race?
I think that's a very good question. I think that there are a few ways of thinking about that. I guess I could see myself as a brand new race, or I could see myself as a sort of diluted mix of two old races.
I think it's definitely a system that affects people in different ways. Like white people in general may not think about race, while people of color they live it every day because they live in their color every day. So I don't know. I've never actually thought about that. That's a really, really good question.
My instinct is to define race as like what color we are, but then like being a multiracial person, I know that like the races of the people who, like your ancestors, I guess, your parents, play a really big part in it, and those two things they don't necessarily match up, like what you look like versus what you actually are. So I guess I don't really have a good definition, and I don't think that there's ever really going to be a definition of race that makes sense.
To me, I guess race isn't really that important. It doesn't really... I guess the only thing I can say genetically is that when I drink I get an Asian flush, but like otherwise there's not really any importance, I guess.
I don't know. For myself, race, that's hard because I don't know what race is because I'm so many things, and usually people are cast into specific boxes. But being multiracial isn't really a box, or it's not an acceptable box. You kind of have to pick which one you want to be part of. And so I think over time, I've chosen to be in the white box or the European box for internally, but externally, everyone else puts me in a box of like Asian or Hispanic. So I don't really know what I would consider to be the definition of race.
My definition of race is how you view yourself. It really, I think, race comes down to how you see yourself. If you are, my sister is very, very light-skinned, very fair. And I think she identifies as African-American. You wouldn't be able to tell from looking at her. She has her hair straightened too. So she looks, to anyone but family, pretty white. Looks a lot like my mom, actually. But she identifies as African-American. And she's half black. Why shouldn't she be able to identify as African-American? So I think race really comes down to how you see yourself. But then again, at the same time, I don't think race should be a thing. It kind of makes me mad all the time. So, but I think race really at this point comes down to how. It comes down. I think it should come. Ideally, it comes down to how you view yourself. But in reality, it also comes down to how the world views you.